Hello, with scientific, with pseudo-scientific, what is not. So when you hear people speaking, they're saying, "Oh, this person's saying bad things." Oh, what's your opinion? Oh, this, but no one's using real premises, for example. And so the metaphysics of the law. I'm not a lawyer. Originally, still was recorded that and how lawyers were in collusion with the branches, witch trials, slavery simultaneously, used remotely as their own form of slaves, jobs, roles, as fact cheap nature, tactical interior from that which is not only native pure, the only way that guides everywhere at once as its own system. We could make up and be other systems, but it's going to show that we're only temporary positive as criminal and see. It's just nature's a positive as negative to its system. So relevant to the changing difference of Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to the rest of space slash existence, and further distinctly from that, individually grouped and together. Part of what demonstrates further from that, per its complete volume, which is two identities of sequence slash simultaneous nature, further too, per science. See, but it's per science that doesn't have debates that force equality of fact keeping nature, use that require uses of simultaneously criminally foreign influence fact keeping nature qualities and aspects and sequence value treatments and the value of simultaneous treatments. So there are revelations inherent to contemplating what was simultaneously between that which would that unfolded as the formal roles with what was colonization, as roles was in the form of narratives by and as witch trials, even if they made it up. In other words, they made it up. And it's right next to where George Washington left slavery entrenched in the North and South. We were obligated to explain why and how they had to leave that entrenched. We're obligated to understand that. We're obligated to show how people that know the most about American history would do and can and get away with self-valuing too. Other told that used to hurt out what people actually is proper answers, as actually what is smart answer, as actually what is wise answer. And see, that's what is smart or wise is too. It's invisible but still discernible. So if you follow what I've been saying, the hyper what is hyper hum functional by being hyper invisible but still discernible. You can still to tell. You have to contemplate further. You have to observe that further, and you can't. You leave out the smallest finite detail. Have has have emotions been spoken about honestly, but where they're pretending so, leaving all exceptions exception nature. You know, against innocence and against that which they're furthering specifically to keep where they kept and keep people hiding, needing to hide way more the same finite active progressive illusions without realizing everyone needed to hide styles relative to nature's treatments by positive and negative. No longer that quality of fact treatment nature capable of affording people short words. It's a big so in other words, and the value of them at locations. All locations sickly distinctly to keep how sickly non distinctly from being discerned. And that was sustained because where and how it was being and having been exploited, no one discerned. And while no one was discerning it, it was complete remote possession of the identities of sophistication slash non-sophistication, apart with being, from being systems, tactical ulterior from those that we are as the human system, individually grouped and together, tied to our syntax nature. Why and how these sounds have the identity of relationship they have to themselves and with the other languages. The same way. The identity of the ground. See, the rest of the earth has no criminal foreign influences, especially legalized ones, especially differentially, but differentially increasingly, and increasingly by what uses it and everyone's factory nature remotely. One of the things that is recorded when people make treatments by color, they self-value what has been through time, so they could quote it. Oh, well, that's why. I don't know. I think things go sideways, as Whoopi Goldberg said, with color. But she said, as someone who's forced to not have that quality of fact nature, sickly distinctly. In other words, where and how. This has never had anything to do with that. It has to do with to measure it. The breaching method measures and maintains where and how no one at the identity, the ground, locations, areas, and states can defend their qualities of positive and negative treatments. All right, and I name treatments, title treatments, ground voice treatments, and simultaneously make proper treatments, which are simple, just extensive. Well, but by the revelations of where and how black was used and defended uses of it and the causes of it, blamed on other things other than our own selves, like our fathers, our founding parents, the founding parents of other countries too. We came in as a modern trap already entrenched here with slavery, North America, South America entrenched. Different countries were using remotely North and South America. Those lands were themselves already having been used remotely from semi-ancient times, where the sciences became criminally foreign influenced. The science of humanity, how every individual grouped and together had been led originally by that which is actually simultaneous. See, then they invented fake histories and fake and defenses, of mixed with delusions propagated formally and informally with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Hundreds of countries shared like that now. Tactical terror from how we're supposed to be shared are automatically anyway. Why is it so increasingly significant too? Actually, everywhere at once. The identity of the other countries, it's the identity of the human body, individual. Well, the difference is to discern. In other words, clear as day. When people make treatments of black and white, they're incapable of, and they're having a slightest bit. In other words, if they're not on the about injunctive reliefs, even though that phrase, or if they're trying to pretend to be about that, but just to keep the time used at all locations, collusion with where and how. There are only three branches of government, and my country's A through Z. Before there was sophistication, before they were even founded as countries, all locations, areas, and states had been entertaining through defenses of themselves into more and more other motivations, natures, needs, interests. all used remotely though, by what everyone was missing when they're blaming other things, others themselves for what the breaching method was causing, and watching them blame everything others ourselves for the real causes of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures at all locations, and made engineered before then while the infrastructure from tactically denatured Earth and its identity of relationship to itself, native pure. It had already sustained forced roles with Native Americans roles now with their system, their value system. So syntactically, now time impositions and to retreats. So from their education, from their ability to preserve the education of that came means to what nature is going to keep demonstrating that the sciences became criminally foreign influenced and used remotely, including the sciences as they are grouped. So we can make a counter grouping. All things, what is actually simultaneous demonstrates that either wars and weapons and bombs or sanctions and nothing other but exploitation, exception nature as criminalization nature in the same and furtherance of the same thing. Don't forget how extremism and radical Islam, those words from the dictionary were used with criminally foreign influence, motivations, natures, needs, interests, intentions, and collaboration and collaborative roles. Two, are increasingly relevant to where and how originally and still. Time would be used simultaneously, too fast and too slow simultaneously when people would walk into courts that would further witch trials, that would further slavery, sickly distinctly against everyone as that one method and what and how it works that everyone missed for being jerks as roles. What can we do? You could allow people to admit it outside of courts, outside of police stations. They have been attaching people to fake communications with themselves through time. They've been used remotely as victims, but as victim predators, same way in differentially with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. All the people retired and standing get on off the, places where we are value progression, where there can be, where we are sense and sensibility. Now through systems, tactical ulterior, through a system/S, tactical ulterior, from that one that is native pure, that tied to our syntax, the hypersyntax nature, our hyperlinguistics. This is hyperlinguistics. This which surges through our things and long, even before us. Whichever course it takes, and with exception to exception nature, more finite and greater than that too. Oh, you have not been taught. You ought to here, attend. New York City, America, we can all together mend. And every city in the world for boys and girls. So we can make a whole bunch of natures of this is we have to understand the trap. And there's a method/S by it. And everyone missed the method part. Even the directors of countries A through Z and grouped of their legal natures. Everyone can discern it relative when we put up the simultaneous thing. They had nuclear weapons all the time. They had suit and ties. And they have an identity of answers to us. They have narratives by what politics mean, what or what democracy means, or what a dictatorship means. Not an actual fact treatment. They make women's rights by Roe versus Wade. They make Marbury versus Madison about Marbury versus Madison rather than about the details. Being, quote, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice, end quote. That means the finest detail that's showing we are other than nature's course. Even that should be not ignored. Not one person in New York City could walk outside and plant a seed. All exceptions in exception nature, where seeds have been planted in New York City, they are in them defenses of the that relevant to needs to use these revelations as evidence. In other words, those opinions are regardless. Their motivations are regardless. There are exceptions, but first we have to discern that which everything relevant to the breaching method. That which we have to syntactically conceive as a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, recognizing that and how linguistically, syntactically, archetypal criminal enterprises are countries A through Z, fact treatment nature oriented roles that were being and having been extended to self-value roles and needs and natures with where and how styles relevant to the child abuses at the youngest ages, how they were our time. We have to coordinate. They were coordinated with the campuses of each age and nature, including fire campuses, medical campuses, including private database relationships. There were per this method since before computers, where slavery was involved, the witch trials. There were database relationships. There was complete possession over the fact treatment nature, qualities and aspects and natures, all ulterior from our nature's nature. That which is temporary positive, also lasting positive per its system and per its method and use by value, not just the partial ones and even the complete ones. All points where they have us like this. Originally, still, we could use the might of where and how nature itself will demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures to a system, to every identity, individually grouped and together, a part of a system that will have slavery. Entertained, and where and how they're making simultaneously opinions / convictions, and about nature. For example, making opinions or convictions about other people's names or locations, or the ground's voices, too distinctly. And that's relevant to, it's not complicated, but everyone start arguing, in other words, how identity or volume of the simultaneous as increasing value, where and how questions are increasingly valued. It is increasingly valued as answered /s. What were witch trials about? We know that slavery overtly, it was easy to discern, is invisible but still discernible. The causes. And so we know that witch trials is about a form of slavery. We know that those crazy laws that came with torture methods. And we know that everyone blamed other things, others, ourselves, rather than that. And we know the motivations of that were also being and having been offensively pretended, dishonestly, per roles with locations, originally still overtly / insidiously delusions wrought, and use self-value uses of criminally foreign influence, identity, ground, locations, area, states. Fact, cheating nature collusions. So when slavery is brought up, it is an identity of relationship to the sciences individually grouped and together. For all the things is torture comes simultaneously with that, because the breaching methods there too. It uses torture because it's not something. It's not our nature's natural course, so it's not syntactically, but it's pretending other. So, and it's doing it through people that so used remotely, because while locked, saying and so, and it was, as styles of fact cheaping nature and blaming everything all like that can't counter where individually grouped and together is in the identity of negative value nature progression /s. Individually grouped and together, that which modern countries are in, they offensively have online policies in collusion as victims, for example, the same way as victim predators, where and how they're keeping people, types of rights, groups, groupings, and styles of logic at all locations involved offensively, butting into people's business, where and how we are prevented short words, and people are told to describe us as having had other words and attaching us to fake words tied to others, people of each age of factual nature, because these are also people in cases and with all kinds of ways of planting evidences at locations, intermediary between cases, like depositions locations. Lawyers' offices, locations next to locations, because of the method that is fact nature oriented, motivations that no one has allowed demonstrated, because everyone is offensively with physical delusions and simultaneously with criminally foreign influence qualities of fact nature aspects and qualities, and relative to where and how criminal insidiousness is increasingly valued to questions, a whole bunch of questions relevant to American history and modern countries' histories, and where and how is relevant to where and how other was and is pretended, and other was is pretended the source of it. So our founding parents left us to teach that George Washington and humanity wants nothing to do with slavery. They had to hide their roles with those countering that crazy breaching method that individually grouped and together had slavery North and South America entrenched, formally interbranch. All exceptions, exception nature tied to them, prisons, where they would get their food, where they went to school, where they go home to, the corner people, the uses of the corner of the streets, uses of the parks, uses of the entrances to the parks, side entrances. In other words, complete remote possession over all identities of sophistication / non-sophistication. And so as styles used remotely. So we cannot counter this without countering that which is simultaneously overtly / insidiously at the campus's intercities through time connection and relevant to uses remotely of the sense and sensibilities of people who were forced to use each other's names, and we were in the past, because there's a method by that. It's a method of identity theft / fraud / slander that was against and is against the leaders of modern countries, no matter what form of leader they are, sickly distinctly from, while sickly non-distinctly from too simultaneously, how against the people of locations, areas, and states, too, only having known criminal insidiousness natures of positive and negative treatment simultaneously, identity treatment simultaneously, through the people that preserved the sciences as victims. So no one realizes, because it is also how there are abridged sciences. So, and there are through motivations that no one wanted. And all exceptions, exception nature too, and demonstration is the same thing. And so all identities of sophistication, all identities of the ground locations, identities are being and have been used remotely, overtly / insidiously, simultaneously, criminally foreign influence, distinctly, non-distinctly. So, for example, to discern the relevance of that, and again, as the relevance of the simultaneous, as a value where the metaphysics of the law are overtly denied the significance of values. In other words, treatment's proper, the significance of all that can be discerned, the revelations where and how. Someone would deny Whoopi Goldberg the means and needs to speak the revelations from where and how there are physical delusions. Simultaneously, there are criminally foreign influence, fact treatment nature, qualities, and aspects that are being and haven't been used by a whole bunch of uses, individually grouped in together, themselves used remotely. And this is not leaving out where and how. Black / the colors, white, colluded. And white is a whole bunch of different countries. No. See, this is a game that is reliant upon each age of and each nature of campus of the republic for which we stand, being having been abridged, and having self-valued that where it was and is relevant at critical instances of all natures to all locations, areas, and states. Vaccines. But no one hears these things because they force the aggression narratives, because they lied to the little boys and the little girls sickly distinctly. And again, everyone missed how sickly non-distinctly, because everyone has been preventing mandated law at all locations and offensively. And that sustained keeps exceptions in exception nature, used in the furtherance of what really most needs to be countered. And so we have to be able to speak through where people are pretending they don't want to understand that when we say simple things. Like when we call, if I say a simple sentence, about, in other words, the police know they affected confessions to me. The ones with a whole bunch of that ones through time, whole bunch of wire crime rolls, of child abuse rolls, natures of abuse rolls. Oh, we have right to lie. They're doing from background, every intercities through time. They've been preventing me and others, freedom, sickly distinctly, and sickly non-distinctly. So tell it right, no one has the ability to tell it without using that which is overtly / insidiously really the causes of negative value nature regressions, acts, and natures at New York City. No one can walk outside the door and plant the seed. Space means and come out of nowhere, even right in New York City alone. If we just admit this hyper trap /S/trap/S. I tell best vaccines. Other countries have the same problem to face. Same problem /S. They already have and had those problems sustained to exploit them at all identity ground locations. Same stupid nature since before the founders of our countries. Nature part uses of them, scale of things, vaccines. I mean, it's right, but not always, and left out accepts nature, so it's wrong. Shows when you really look. So, my name is Anthony Wall, and we could put in place pantheism, knowing that it's about hyper-pantheism. But when we speak about it, we have to, we could check. And people should be able to, in other words, the news media is people who are allowed to speak and be heard or be heard. It's influenced by people from off locations, from off the news locations, from off the schools, from off the online companies' locations. What is maintained is collusion /S with the other motivations and nature's needs, interests. They take collaboration with other nature's needs, interests already present at all database locations, at all locations since before computers. When they were describing things, they were describing arrays of names to fit to an application, worse than just colonization, which is the remote uses of all locations, areas, and states, colonies A through Z, before the first 13 states were shown the offering of a gift to try to live up to be the worth of 13 state / hyper tribes. And we cannot be a tribe till we could liberate the identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself, native pure. And that, even the most, across the world, everything fits to that scale of overtly / insidiously, tactically denatured, all the way up to the peaks of infrastructure, meets to it, and the grounds around it, all grass, take away the grass. Every year, the soil, less worms, the whole nature is gone, change. The water all underground, or it's arranged like a trap rolls. It'll flood them. Some, too many things at once. Oh, we'll listen to the experts. The experts individually grouped together when they defend their identities. It is measured and maintained. They can't go back and discern the actual, in other words, people, their actual natures as a victims, the same way the overt crazy, logic when they show the people when the problems that have everyone screaming in the media, but everyone's screaming wrong, even when they're screaming right, and they're screaming against innocent people. They're offensively in collusion with that which is in keeping and having kept a whole bunch of countries individually grouped together as victims, till how groups as countries as group they are victims as a predator. A whole bunch of ways simultaneously at the other end of bombs, never having been integrity to have. What is the answer? The science of religion. And so, in other words, mandated law at all locations. And we have to have, demonstrated what is actually recorded, the physical delusions, propagation roles that doctors have and how they've been getting away with it because of the roles of courts, with crime methods, with them fabricating audio and video at locations, and with their patients and criminals before they get caught, and against innocent people, and uses of criminally foreign influence readings of statutes where and how they have all kinds of natures of abuses of kids involved with their uses of Facebook and their narratives, their motivations, other for what they're actually, they need to look real. They need to use their own kids as their pretended motivations, leaving out what's actually recorded, their motivations. Even which goes down to class placements, also where how they were abused as kids themselves. What deeds? Lethal IDs. So truth proceeds, but pretends not. Boxing gets hot. It's told. Be told. So, thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Don't forget, once we should get this going to YouTube ground, we'll all gather around. In other words, and we'll start with them. Our videos about we want declared, for example, for hyper reliefs for the people in New York City. We're going to do for Black and for Native American too, additionally. But for just the desperate logistic, we want hyper reliefs and how we could afford it. I have to I don't feel like, I hope I don't have a heart attack because my left arm is, I don't know if it was from this chair sitting here. Apparently. Thank you.